All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So once again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and thanks for joining me today for Managing Supply Chains from Disruption to Resilience. Before I dive into the formal presentation, let's just cover a few housekeeping details. So today's session is scheduled to last just for 30 minutes. It does include Q&A. Now, you're going to be muted during today's presentation. We did get one question submitted prior, so I've got that on the slides, and I'll address that at the very end of today's presentation. You can also submit questions in the chat during the conversation, and I'll also take a look at those as I conclude, just to answer any of those that came up during the presentation. If at any time we do have an outage today, we haven't had one, but just in case, you can try to reconnect a couple of different ways. You can either just refresh your screen, or you can go to the email that you received prior to today's session and just re-click on the link, and that should join you back into the presentation. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our supply chain experts, or if you have any questions about Exostar or our solutions, you can reach out to us a couple of different ways. You can email us at supplychain@exostar.com, or you can come to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a form on every page on the website that you can submit questions to us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Now, if one of the questions you have today is, can I get today's presentation? The answer is yes. As a follow-up to today's session, we'll be sending you a PDF version of today's slides, as well as a link to today's recording. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So when we're talking about supply chain disruptions for this particular session today, what we're going to talk about is how can you better manage your relationship with those folks that you supply. So your customers, if you will. How can you get better view into the demand that's coming to you, the changes in that as quickly and easily as possible, and how can you react to that more quickly? So that's how we're going to really focus on those supply chain disruptions and make it a better experience, if you will, for both sides. Now, obviously, in the aerospace and defense industry, there are a number of unique challenges that go on across and within the supply chain. For those of you who work with subcontractors and are yourselves primes, right? And this is obviously the large primes, but a number of folks have the contracts directly with the DoD, and you subcontract work out. So you need to be assured that you are providing them the necessary information they need to fulfill the contracts, that you're doing that in a secure and collaborative manner, that you're meeting all those cybersecurity requirements, but also that they're compliant with those as well. That as quickly and easily you're flowing them the necessary information on orders, that you're communicating changes in those orders as easily and quickly as possible. But that same flow happens upstream as well. So you need a way to easily collaborate with those folks that you've contracted with. You need to do this in a secure manner. You need to ensure that your supplier scorecard ranks you as fairly and as, if you will, in real time as possible as well. So with the Exostar community, we bring a number of solutions in this area. And the one we're going to talk about today is how do we really focus on that number 3 that you see there, on that order to cash transaction flow. How do you get visibility as quickly and easily as possible about those changes in demand and react to those accordingly? Now, most of you may have this experience today where OEMs today in the aerospace and defense industry may very well have a supplier portal that you go into, and that's where you gather your information about the orders you have with them. You pick up new orders from that and submit your orders back to them. When you've got orders from them, you ensure that the promise dates are correct. You ensure that the ordering or delivery dates, promise dates, etc., are correct. And you typically communicate these through these different supply chain portals. The problem often is that these are web-based portals, so you've got to go to each one individually. Now, many of you use Exostar today to reach these portals. You've got at least the same credentials to get into those portals, but it is still an experience where you've got to go to a different web portal. You've got to then either download a CSV file from that portal with all of your orders and their current status, dates, etc. You then often have to swivel seat around to your ERP system, reconcile those manually, or you're taking a download from your ERP, you're adjudicating, if you will, those different columns and lines, making the changes necessary, etc., and then feeding that back into your ERP and then manually entering it back into that supply chain portal. Now, what we want to do is better automate that particular process. How do I get notified as changes and when changes occur on those supply chain portals? And can I get them in one location? And can I feed those directly? And that's what we're going to talk about and how we improve that overall experience. Now, when you don't get that information in a timely manner, right? And with all these different supply chain portals, you may not be able to keep this up on a daily basis. So you may end up with inventory management issues because demand is either moved out or brought in that may, obviously impact your inventory or your work in progress as you start to try and fulfill the requirements of the folks that you're working with. Obviously, if you don't have that inventory on hand, you're going to have to increase your operational costs to get that and fulfill that. This obviously impacts those scorecards that you get as a supplier. This impacts customer satisfaction on both sides. It may impact your customer satisfaction with your suppliers, as well as the customer satisfaction to those that you are supplying. And obviously, this strains those supplier relationships. So the reason that Exostar can help in this area is that Exostar hosts, manages, and provides those supply chain portals for a large number of the primes in and across the aerospace and defense industry. We were founded over 25 years ago by these large primes to really work across their supply chain and allow a collaboration with their supply chain and the various primes to exchange this kind of information more quickly and easily. Now, for many years, Exostar had really focused on that particular relationship of Exostar with the primes and providing them services. But over the years, we've grown out that community. We now have 52,000 organizations that are the suppliers to those larger organizations. And many of you are larger organizations yourself. You have organizations you're pushing down business to. And so we can provide, the same kind of experience for you. But what we're really talking about today is your relationship with those large primes and how do I automate that process of getting the demand and providing a better experience for my procurement group and the organizations that are fulfilling demand from those larger organizations. So many of you today, you go into Exostar. You typically go in through our what you often see as the managed access gateway. This provides you access to those different supply chain portals. And because you're part of the Exostar network, you can use the same credentials that you have from for example, Boeing to also get to Lockheed or other organizations that you need to reach. Now, you may be using their supply chain portal. You may be using other applications as well, things that work around regulatory compliance and collaboration. You may be fulfilling and answering questionnaires and things like that. Those are all part of the Exostar experience, if you will, or applications that are available to fix a particular issue. Now, but what we're going to talk about today is that demand collaboration. How do I, when I get, can I, or what I should say, can I automatically connect to these many different supply chain portals that I need to get, pull that demand directly into my organization, and actually feed it into my own ERP system? So I don't have to do that manual swivel seat. I don't need to download the information. I don't need to reconcile various spreadsheets, go into various portals, and then update that information. So we want to make this a smooth and seamless experience. We want to set the information of when do I want to pull information from my customers. I'm going to pull that information in. I'm going to then feed that directly into my ERP so I get quicker notification of when demand changes. I can react more quickly to that. I can, put in my promise dates and things like that directly in my ERP system, and I can feed that directly back to my customers. I can then, when I'm ready to fulfill that demand, I can get those ASNs. I can print the packing lists and the ASN numbers, etc., directly at my docs, and I can get those products in a better or more quicker manner to my customers at the end of the day. Now, we do this in Exostar with our demand line application. This demand line application is what's going to enable this to occur. And what demand line is going to do, it takes information from all of these different supply chain portals, often that have different fields and different kinds of information, etc. But it normalizes that across the Exostar network. It feeds it into demand line. That's the application itself. That can be either hosted by Exostar or it can be hosted at your location. But then it's going to feed into your ERP because it's normalized that data across. Now, the way this looks is when I set up this schedule. I'm going to show you this in the application in just a minute, but I'm using a demo system when I show the application. But what you're going to do is you're going to tell demand line which of the different supply chain portals you want to reach out to. When do you want that to occur? How often? Is this a daily thing, a weekly thing? Do you want it to be hourly, etc.? So you can set that up based on your particular schedule. Now, you see only 4 instances here of partner relationships, but Exostar has, I believe, somewhere between 15 and 19 of these currently available. And as we get demand from our customers, we look to add additional supply chain portals as that demand is required. So you set this up, and then this is going to do just what I mentioned before. It's going to go to those supply chain portals. It's going to pull down that information, normalize it, so you can start to do and get information about those demand changes on that daily, weekly, hourly basis, even if you wanted to, and then determine their impact on you and what you need to do to address those changes. And maybe that part of that addressing those changes is going back to your buyer and saying, hey, this, we see that you've changed a firm order. Is that going to be pulled back in at a later date? What is that? And what are both your obligations contractually and their obligations to you contractually if, firm orders are changed? But this gives you that information to take back to them. And because this is done on a, based on your schedule, demand line is going to maintain those snapshots. It's going to maintain that information so you can do those comparisons and contrasts against time to determine where and when the demand changed. So let me show you how that actually looks. So I've got the demand line application running here. Whoops, sorry. That's just the VDI, it's actually here. And this is this application, and I've got this one now hooked up to GE Aviation. So I am, a medium-sized supplier to GE Aviation, and I've got demand line running. I've got this running on a daily schedule, and it's going out and picking up my POs, or I can do it by parts as well, the current demand or the current orders that are sitting with GE Aviation. I can take a look, this at the part level, and I can see which POs this is against, what is currently firm, order status against those different parts, the ship dates, required dates, etc. So all of this, I'm just pulling down from that. Now, hopefully, as you saw when I looked at the order schedule, not only did I have the partner, but I also had those dates. So this is running on that schedule, and it's maintaining that information here and within demand line, so I can do those comparisons across and see the changes that have occurred. Now, oftentimes today, when you go into those supply chain portals, you're seeing a snapshot in time of the current status of that order, right? If you don't go in on a daily basis, you may lose some of that contextual if that order changed. So this is going to bring that down on that daily basis. It'll show you those changes as they've occurred. And the way you can do that is through the schedule analysis. So I can, look at comparison details for my partner, GE Aviation, and I can choose those dates I want to run it against. Now, not many changes may happen from day to day, but I could do that. But I'm going to go back in a week. So let me go from 8/2 to 7/28. Let me look here at what changes have occurred. I can do all parts, or I can filter this down and just show me those parts that have changed. I can then take a look, and this will then show me those changes on a day-to-day basis for that range that I've occurred. Now, these are changes that have occurred within the last 45 days to this order. And this across the top, you see the dates, right? This was 7/28, 7/29. This is what is ordered. Here's what's remaining in transit, etc. What you start to see as we go across is that demand has changed. We've gone from 0 to 2 to 5. We then dropped orders out, right? We went to -6, and we're seeing that real impact on our business on a dollar basis, because this is also hooked up into our ERP. So we're seeing that real-time effect on these different changes to this particular part across the different orders on a daily basis. This is illustrated even better with when you start to take a look at other reports available to you, like the at-risk inventory. So again, I can look at GE Aviation. This is going to show me all those changes that have occurred. For this particular part, we went from 5 on firm release to 4. And this is an expensive part, so this is my current at-risk inventory. And you see the total at risk is a pretty significant amount. And each of these tell me, what has gone on with that. So what this allows me to then do is I can get a report of this out from the system that I could share with my buyer on the other side to say, hey, look, these are the changes that have occurred with this particular part. Here's the PO number and on which it was ordered. This was the line. These are the due dates. These are the quantities before, and then the quantities that have changed throughout that. So this then allows you with the history, if you will, to be able to justify and understand and have that discussion with more information available to you. So you can better take that argument to your to your counterpart on the other side to say, hey, is this going to even out over time? Is this coming back in? What really happened here, and what can we do to address this? Now, what we can also do is using this load variance. This is going to tell us which parts have changed out within a lead time that we've established with that organization, right? We're a manufacturer, and within our contracts, we have lead time that we have to have in order to make a part. So I've got that. So I'm using a demo instance, so the dates are in the past. So this is going to give me a look at by parts, which where did the demand fall out within the lead time that we were given. So in this case, right, we had 6 parts that were ordered on 15 July, and this is the quantity, 6, right? And we have a particular lead time for this product. Now, flat lines are good, but obviously deltas are bad because that may have changed, right? We have a lead time of 147 days. Just let us know, right? And we may not, this is going to materially impact, not necessarily our ability to deliver because they've reduced it, but because that change has occurred during lead time, we may have a recourse to recoup those changes contractually. In this one where it fluctuates, a little bit within, again, a problem. So again, we can get that report out. We can exchange this, email it back to our counterpart on the other side to determine if there is something that we can do. Is there something that's going to change? Is there something that we can do to address that this has fallen, that this change has occurred within the agreed upon lead time. So now what you're seeing here is through the web interface. And this is a view you always have, but where this power can really come in is when this is connected directly into your ERP. Exostar has a number of ready-to-go integrations to some of the leading ERPs out there for small and medium-sized businesses in the aerospace and defense industry. So it's a fairly lightweight lift to both install the software, demand line, and to make those connections directly into your ERP. Let me jump back to the slide presentation. So as I mentioned, this is all about automating that demand in and across your supply chain. It's allowing you to go to one or more of those supply chain portals, pull that information into your premise, if you will, into your instance of demand line. As it does that, because demand line is reaching multiple portals, it's going to take that data and normalize it. It's going to put it into the data fields, if you will, that demand line expects, and it's going to feed that directly into your ERP. It allows you then to get the analytics like I showed you, those different schedules, your stock versus work in progress. When you're ready to deliver, it allows you to generate those ASNs, print those out directly on your floor, do all of those things in a more automated way. So you get a better notification time. You're more up, if you will, on the changes that have occurred, and you can react to them accordingly. Now, demand line is at a number of customers out there. Exostar has been doing these EDI kind of exchanges for any number of years. We've now productized it in our demand line application. So these don't all have to be one-offs. We can now provide this interface directly through this application, but we also have these canned integrations to the leading ERPs out there. so you can better incorporate those directly into your process, directly into your business. This frees up your groups to more focus on what are concerns about your business than just doing that manual work of going into supply chain portals, updating records manually, updating your records as well as the supply chain portals manually, and so saves time and effort across your organization. As I mentioned, demand line, and we can partner this with our supply line application. Supply line are those, if you will, those supply chain portals that you see there. So if you're a larger manufacturer with many different suppliers and you yourselves want to be able to provide a supply chain portal for your suppliers, Exostar can be that particular solution for you. If you combine this with demand line, your suppliers can then work in demand line. They can feed you directly in supply line their changes and automate that flow much more easily than you can with one-off EDI connections for each individual supply chain. All of these can be connected back to your ERP systems to again better automate that overall process to really free up your organization to more focus on your particular business and add value back into it. Exostar has a number of different solutions for the supply chain. We talked today about the supply chain portals and those demand line applications. Exostar also offers solutions around CMMC compliance, both applications to help you get CMMC certified. We have a secure enclave if you need a place to store, process, and transmit CUI. We provide that identity and access management solution for people can get to your supply chain application securely, and Exostar can manage that trust relationship between you and your different suppliers. Allows you to not have to burden your IT organization with that and allows you to outsource that kind of thing to Exostar itself. So as I mentioned, we did get one question in prior to today's session. As you see, it's here. How do I successfully manage risks associated with Supplier when my company adopts only email and spreadsheet for supply chain management? Now, if you're a smaller organization where you only have, tens of suppliers, spreadsheet and email may be okay with you. And if that's the case, I would suggest that you use kind of a standard template for those spreadsheets. Now, when we're talking about risks in the aerospace and defense industry, one of the prime risks currently is how do I ensure that my supply chain is CMMC compliant, right? As these DFARS clauses are flowed down to me from the primes I work with, I need to ensure that my supply chain is also compliant. So how do I know that? One of the things you're going to have to do is just ask those questions. Are you CMMC certified? Are you able to handle controlled unclassified information? If you're doing that in a spreadsheet method, that's okay if you can handle that process because you only have a few suppliers. If you need an automated solution, Exostar does have a supplier management module as part of our overall portal or as part of our overall platform. That allows you to gather that information from your supply chain, allows those checks and recertifications to occur as needed. So with that, I'm going to check the chat real quick. Well, I don't see any questions that came across, so I want to thank everybody for your time today. Hope you have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Thanks so much.